Hello people studying Ransom and the Queen. To get you up to date, in the past I have covered themes, film techniques, historical context, and why it's important for you to understand this in particular for these two text pairs so you can achieve A+ in your essays. I'd highly recommend that you go ahead and watch the collection of videos that I have created for you over the past couple of months based on this text pair, because a lot of what you learn in those videos will help you get an even better understanding of what we're talking about today. So the essay topic we're looking at today is Uneasy Lies the Head That Wears the Crown, the Queen, the lighter role of being a man, Ransom. Compare how the two texts show the burden experienced by those in leadership positions. We'll use the think and execute strategy throughout this video, which I won't go into detail, but it's something that I cover in my How to Write a Killer Text Response ebook. This strategy follows specific steps: analyze, brainstorm, and create a plan to help you ensure that you're answering the prompt and don't go off topic accidentally, while ensuring that you write an essay that scores you the highest marks possible. Looking at what type of prompt this is, I can see that it's a theme-based prompt. This means I will not only focus on the theme of leadership, but also on interconnected themes in order to elaborate and build upon the idea of leadership. These will include sacrifice and public versus private obligations. You'll see how this unfolds in the next step. Step 2, brainstorm. First things first, I never want to assume that the examiner's interpretation of these keywords is the same as my own. After all, what makes English unique is that everybody's interpretations is different. So to ensure that the examiner and I are on the same page, I'll make sure I outline my interpretation of what leadership means. Instead of writing a definition of what leadership means though, which would be super dry for the examiner to read, and probably something that feels pretty forced on your end. After all, you're not a dictionary. I actually want to spend my first paragraph detailing my understanding and interpretation of what leadership means. Here I could talk about the responsibilities of a leader, what it means to be a leader, like respecting and upholding traditions, to be able to make difficult decisions. Then I could even talk about the leader's identity, what it means to embody the traits of a leader. For example, stoicism, selflessness, integrity, maybe even isolation. I know it might seem a little bit extra to dedicate an entire paragraph to unraveling what a leader means, but in this case, I think it makes sense because by setting up the essay with a discussion on how much a leadership role requires of a person, I can then power my following paragraphs regarding why, therefore, leadership is full of burdens. Now, I want to think about burden experienced and what that means. Immediately, I think of the familial sacrifices made and the challenging balance between a leader's private life versus public obligations. I discussed the examples and evidence for these in step 3. While a brainstorm is usually just you unleashing all of your possible ideas onto paper and then organizing your best ideas into a logical, coherent plan, I want to show you what happens when you just run out of ideas. Let's say we only come up with 2 ideas. The first one about what leadership means, and the second one about the private versus public obligations. These 2 ideas will probably become my first and second paragraphs. At this point, I often get stuck coming up with a third idea. I know, I've been doing English for so long now, and even now I still get stuck coming up with that third paragraph, and I know I'm not alone. So you don't think you're alone if you're a third paragraph struggling for ideas person like me. At this point, in order to troubleshoot, I like to look at themes I've written down in my notes and use these as a springboard for ideas. To make sure you've got all the themes covered, make sure you have a look at my Ransom and the Queen themes video. While looking at the themes in my own study guide, because after all, I wrote this guide, so it's pretty much like my notes, I can see I can tie in the idea of tradition, change, and the new, the burden experienced by both leaders in upholding tradition versus making way for the new, and also death, grief, and loss, as experienced by both leaders and how this affects their leadership. Now I have more than enough ideas, and it's just a matter of seeing which one of these themes I'd want to integrate when I write my plan. Step 3, write a plan. As mentioned before, I already know I want to share my interpretation of what leadership means, so this will naturally be my first paragraph. I also want to ensure that I include these quotes in my paragraphs. So I'll be making sure I tick this off in my plan so I don't accidentally forget it later when I'm preoccupied with the writing itself. Paragraph 1. Both Ransom and the Queen explore the roles and responsibilities expected of leaders. As Hecuba accurately and succinctly states, you are not any man. Priam's incredibly weighted royal obligations are apparent through the description of his own body as an abstract of the lands he represents. There, his people's living map. His own body and soul has completely been dedicated to his people, to the point where it's no longer his, but theirs. Both leaders have adopted reserved qualities because their role demands this of them. For Priam, silence, not speech, was what was expressive, while the many shots of the Queen pondering silently is reflective of the weight of her decision-making. The absence of other characters in the shots with the Queen serve to highlight how the roles and responsibilities of leadership are very much hers and hers only. As such, this representation showcases just how much burden is experienced by those in leadership positions. See how at the very end of this paragraph I actually tie it in nicely once again to the essay topic, and it also gives me a starting point to build my following paragraphs based on this idea of burden experienced. Paragraph 2. With the heavy responsibilities set upon Priam and the Queen, both texts highlight the challenge leaders face in balancing these obligations with their private lives. I want to focus on familial sacrifices. Here I'll discuss how Priam's royal obligations have suffocated his role as a father. He can't recall the exact number of children in his family, only that the number is approximately 50. I'll integrate the essay topic, quote, the lighter role of being a man throughout this example too. Meanwhile, the Queen's reaction to Prince Charles's desire to fly a private jet to see Diana in hospital, isn't that precisely the sort of extravagance they always attack us for? This isn't a matter of state. She's more concerned about the media's reaction, rather than her family's needs. She means well, but it doesn't come across this way to her family. If anything, it pushes Charles even further away. Here I can use foil evidence as well. A foil is a character who contrasts with another character to highlight particular qualities of the other character. In other words, I can look at those who aren't in leadership positions and show how they don't have the familial burden experienced by the Queen and Priam. For example, Prince Charles's first response is to be by Diana's side. He doesn't even consider the public reaction to his flying the royal jet. Noticing the deep attachment between Somax and his family, Priam ponders if losing a son really did mean the same for him as it did for the driver. By discussing foils, I can also include the other characters, because I don't want my essay to only be about the Queen and Priam, since that won't demonstrate how much I actually know about these two texts. At this point, I've still got a couple of ideas from our brainstorm: tradition, change in the new, and death, grief, and loss. I'm going to choose to deal with death, grief, and loss because I personally feel that this ties in more coherently with my second paragraph regarding the idea of the challenging balance between private and public obligations. Instead of looking at this challenging balance from the angle of familial sacrifices, I'll discuss how leaders face a unique struggle when coping with death. Paragraph 3. Beyond familial sacrifices, both texts also showcase the unique burden experienced by leaders in the face of death. For the Queen, she deals with death privately, while the public demands that she shares her grief in a more public way. I'd elaborate further by discussing her inner conflict with this, and would include the quote, "Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown," in my discussion. That's both quotes ticked off. For Achilles, you see how he isolates himself from his soldiers, and we see him clinging onto his thoughts of his mum and dad, just like a child wanting to be looked after and nurtured. I like that I've got the chance to talk about Achilles here, because up until this point, we've only really talked about the two most obvious leaders in either text. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. If you want to see how I wrote up the full essay based on the plan that we've gone through today, then definitely have a look at my newly released Ransom and the Queen study guide. I am so proud of the study guide that I've written, and I know there are not many resources out there, so I'm confident that it's going to give you an incredible insight into these two texts in preparation for your second exams. Feel free to download a free sample of it, and thanks so much for tuning in today, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!